21st century prohibition unleashes in 2018. We are on the verge of entering what could be the most revolutionary year in the cannabis space. California, a state with 39 million residents and 250 million yearly visitors, goes recreational in January 1st, 2018. Canada will be the second country that federally legalizes recreational cannabis, happening in less than a year. Only 62 licenses have been issued in Canada to authorize the production of cannabis. 2 out of the 62 licenses are held by one specific company that is now strategically positioned to thrive as the floodgates of this trend burst open. For early positioning details, visit crushthestreet.com/wealth. Hello everyone, and welcome in to crushthestreet.com. Here at Crush, my goal is to cover the hottest trends and to make some money along the way. And I've talked a lot about the opportunity, or some I should say, about the opportunity in cannabis, and that it's going to be very, very big going forward here. It's, like taking the shackles off of 1930s Prohibition and what happened with alcohol. But I haven't spent a whole lot of time covering it, but that is changing. I have a lot of pent-up questions to ask my next guest to discuss the opportunity, the stigma, and the future of cannabis and where it's going. And let's not delay this any further. Today, my guest is the CEO of Invictus MD, Dan Kriznic. And his vision is to create a powerful platform of Canadian licensed producers to help meet the legal demand that is springing up as we speak in the cannabis space. So Dan, thanks for coming on the show with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So Dan, let's talk about cannabis and marijuana here and the opportunity and really the direction things are going. We have just so many entities that are legalizing cannabis going into 2018 here. And what is the money flow into the sector going to look like, and how big of an opportunity do you see this?
Yeah, definitely. As the money comes in from an investor perspective, a lot of the money is coming in to support companies like ourselves at Invictus, who is really collecting a lot of cash flow from various investors right now to build out the square footage of our facilities to meet this crazy demand that's coming in by mid next year of 2018, when Canadian government has approved to go recreational. Yeah,
so that's a really big deal. And I read a news article that said in 2016, illegal marijuana sales topped $46.4 billion. And I can just imagine what that would do for companies, for the real economy, if that was channeled through legal means. And the opportunity is huge, the influx of money entering this space and the legal space. Right now, there's the medical space, which is largely legal now in many places, but now we're getting into the recreational space. So talk to us about this, the opportunity. What can you expect, or what can investors expect?
Definitely. So there's been a number of studies that have been done already within the Canadian landscape and even abroad, but just within Canada, one of the big four firms, Deloitte and Touche, put out a recent study saying that in Canada alone, by 2020, it's going to be a $21 billion industry. So, really taking something that is very unique, as you mentioned before, Prohibition, like the 1930s. This is something that has been in existence. It's not a dot-com bubble that people talk about that's going to burst. This is something that has been in our system for decades, if not centuries, and now we're just bringing on legalization. It's something that likely should have been done a very long time ago, but because of the political pressures that have been put on and the stigma, it's taken this long to actually get to where we are. But with all the benefits medicinally, and as well as certain things with the recreational side, it's definitely something that has come to fruition more recently. And I think that with the market where it is today in Canada and abroad, we're definitely capitalizing on it in terms of Invictus and becoming one of the top licensed producers to be able to provide that product to the market.
So Dan, I just have a personal question, and your own intuition, your own feeling. Why has cannabis been illegal so many years when you have other substances out there, such as alcohol and cigarettes, which are legal? Should marijuana be taken more seriously than these other two, or are we going in the right direction here?
Yeah, I definitely think we're going in the right direction. If you look at kind of the history of cannabis and how it was banned in the early kind of 1923, I believe it was banned in Canada. And really a part of that was politically driven. A lot of what was being derived from not only cannabis from bud, but also from the hemp plant, oils that were becoming derivatives, competing against actual oil companies, which is interesting enough, companies like Standard Oil back in the day. And a lot of these companies didn't want to have this kind of competition in place. So there was a lot of working back and forth to ban it in its entirety, hemp, cannabis, etc. And something that was, I think, done more from a political standpoint than from an actual research and development standpoint. As we're finding today, there's a bunch of properties within the cannabinoid profile that actually helps medicinally. And even from, as you mentioned, if you look at a lot of the other drugs that are out there today, very highly addictive, have killed, thousands, hundreds of thousands and millions of people in various different forms, whether it's addiction or whether it's suicide or various other forms. And cannabis hasn't even killed one person. So, having that kind of a track record and where it's going today, I think that we've all opened up our eyes. I keep saying this is no longer a movement. This is a reality. This is actually coming down in every country. Everyone's looking at it. Canada is leading the force right now. It's been legal medicinally for almost a decade now, and now going into the recreational side, again leading, and other countries are following suit. Like Germany recently reached out to Canada to say, look, we want to import product and eventually have a similar type of system of cultivation within the country. So, it's definitely opening up, and I think it's definitely for the good.
So I guess just to add to that or to touch on it, it seems like a two-sided war with age demographics. You have the baby boomers largely against legalization and versus the millennials, which are largely pro, despite, conservative or liberal on the topic. Now, millennials are now larger than the baby boomers. And to me, it's coming. Legalization and the floodgates of recreational marijuana is coming. It's inevitable. But can you add any other insight to just the perception evolving around cannabis, and maybe talk about some of the medical benefits to cannabis that a lot of people just don't know about?
Yes, absolutely. So the age side, the demographic is actually quite interesting. As we continue down the path of legalization, recreational by mid of 2018 in Canada, we're starting to find more and more people coming out of the woodwork in terms of the baby boomers and the acceptance of it. So I always say that I started Invictus back in 2014, and 1 year in cannabis time is more like 10 years in the real world. So, things have been changing so rapidly. The sentiment of the people have changed. People that are baby boomers and above are actually really looking at this from a medicinal perspective. And then to answer your question on the medicinal side of things, various different cannabinoid profiles are helping. I fell in love with this industry when I saw this young girl, Charlotte, who used this product called Charlotte's Web. It was a strain with high CBD, which is cannabidiol, and that's one of the cannabinoid profiles that has no psychoactive effect. And this young child with severe epileptic seizures was taking this strain and was actually helping reduce, if not eliminate in some cases, the epileptic seizures. So that was an approach that I looked at and said, look, this is a real revolutionary change, and something that the whole world should be looking at and adopting. So I'm finding the more that I'm reaching out and the more that I'm in the space and understanding the demographic, it's actually becoming, from young to old, everybody is talking about it. There's grandmothers, grandfathers out there that are talking about it, whether it's for sleep deprivation issues or whether it's for pain or arthritis, etc., as well as obviously using for things like more severe, like cancer or multiple sclerosis or other neurological diseases. This is where the cannabinoid profile with either CBD from an epileptic seizure perspective or THC and the entourage effect that all the cannabinoids put together, it's really become something that all sorts of different ages are using it. I think from a recreational standpoint, going back to the millennials, I'm finding that a lot of the millennials, they're just pro, not because of their, an opinion of it, but just pro because it's something that they weren't really living through the political side of it. They're living through more of the what we are experiencing today, which is people's acceptance of it. So they're living in a different era than the baby boomers, but the baby boomers are definitely changing their sentiment.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the industry a little more now. And we talk a lot about gold and silver and other commodities here at Crush the Street. We touch on blockchain. But not many people understand how cannabis is bought and sold, and what are the metrics for what it's priced at and the cost to produce, and all these different things. Because it essentially is a commodity, and we're seeing supply shortages right now. So, if you would give us a little idea of what is happening, and the kind of the business behind cannabis.
Yeah, so right now I'll give you the Canadian approach because it is one of the countries the second country that's going to legalize federally in terms of recreational use. And so in Canada right now, there are 62 licensed producers and more coming. So the Canadian government under Health Canada, basically, if you follow the stringent process of applying for a license, having all the capital, and it is quite capital intensive to build out these infrastructures and the buildings and the security, et cetera. And once you have those all built out, it can take 2 to 3 years to actually get a license. That's how long a lot of these licensed producers were waiting to come online. And then once they're actually up and running, basically Health Canada provides a cultivation only license. So you cannot sell it until you've actually had a few crops and actually tested those crops. So it's very strict in terms of testing product, making sure there's no pesticides, making sure that the THC and CBD content has all been measured out. And then from there, it can be shipped through the mail to the actual patient under the medical system. So because Canada right now is only legal medically across the country, people who have a medical condition go to their doctor and they get a prescription. That prescription is then filed with a licensed producer in Canada, one of the 62, and then they get their product in the mail. As we go forward, each province in Canada is going to have somewhat of a different regulated system. It's going to be up to the provinces to decide how they're going to regulate the recreational use. So that's something that we're actually going through day by day right now. Each province is coming up with their own methodology of how to distribute product. So we're going to find various different ranges of whether it's going to be fully government controlled, cannabis controlled boards, similar to the liquor boards up in Canada, or whether it's going to be privatization, similar to some provinces that have private liquor. So it is going to be a little bit of a hybrid system. And then the pricing, at this point, the Canadian government was always really adamant about legalizing to get rid of the black market, so they didn't want to put significant taxes on it. Right now, the federal government just recently came out with a $1 per gram excise tax is going to be applied to every gram sold. And then likely the grams will be costing consumers between $8 and $10, depending on the strain. And then depending on which province that will be selling it, some licensed producers will be selling it at wholesale, or they'll be selling it at retail. So it's still a little bit of an unknown provincially, but definitely more and more information to come in the coming months.
So Dan, Invictus has 2 out of the 62 licenses that have been issued in Canada. And this is obviously a special license. You talked about how capital intensive it is to become a producer and how long it takes to actually get the license. So let's talk about Invictus's unique position and its stronghold here in the market, and I guess the opportunity that exists for investors.
Yeah, so we actually have two out of the 62 licenses. We have one location out in Alberta and one location out in Ontario. So our location out in Alberta is on 150 acres. We currently have 800 square feet, on that location, with a 32,000 square foot expansion that's currently underway. So come January 2018, or right around the corner here, we're going to have approximately 5,000 kilograms that will be cultivation and ready for sale. And that will be definitely in time for for the recreational market that's going to be coming up in mid next year. That company we own 100% of, and then we have another company that is in Ontario called AB Laboratories we own 1/3 of, and that one has a facility that's about the size of 16,000 square feet, and then we just acquired another 100 acres near the back end of that location to and for another license which we've recently applied for, which will be able to cultivate as many kilos as the demand calls for. So really right now with Invictus and the strategy, and a lot of strategy with these licensed producers, is to build square footage to be able to come up with this with the product that will definitely come online come mid next year when everything goes recreational. The predictions right now are that there's definitely going to be a shortage. There's a shortage right now under the medical system. So once we go recreational, they're talking about a bigger shortage. Licensed producers are also, some of them are exporting to other countries. So even the predictions of a shortage in Canada hasn't even taken into the fact that we're going to be also exporting to other countries. So definitely the speed to market at this point, a lot of shelf space will come online early for the licensed producers like Invictus, who will be able to get that shelf space because they are already producing. Some of the more recent licenses that came online, they will not be able to capture as quickly that market share because it'll still take time for them to build out and have the cultivation ready. So definitely Invictus' position right now being, I believe, the largest land package owner of licenses in Canada, has the ability to continue to build square footage in order to provide product in the shortage. And currently the company has approximately $27 million in cash in the bank, and that's cash has pretty much been earmarked for this increased building expansion.
That's powerful. I know the company is currently worth around $95 million. And I think that's, I just want to touch on that and get your insight on that. What does that valuation currently represent, and how are you guys valued compared to some of your peers?
Yeah, we're undervalued compared to some of our peers. If you look at a lot of the metrics, and there's reports out there. Echelon Wealth Partners came out with a more recent report that had a speculative buy rating at $2 per share, and we're at about $1.20 per share right now. I think there's just some of our initial overhang from initial shareholders that we're looking to cash out. But moving forward, there's going to be definitely a couple catalysts as we move more from a cultivation license to a sales license, which will happen in short order. I think that this is the real opportunity for investors to get in prior to getting a sales license, because once we do have the sales license, it'll be more of a peer-to-peer comparison, and some of the metrics that are used would value the company considerably higher than what it is today. So we definitely, if we look at our comparable peers, I would say at this stage that we're undervalued, and definitely looking to grow the square footage based on the cash in the bank. We're very strong in terms of our balance sheet, as I mentioned, $27 million in cash. And then another metric used in the space for investors to know is what's called funded capacity, meaning how much cash is in the bank and how much capacity can you build out with that cash. And right now we're at about 15,000 kilograms of funded capacity, meaning we would not have to raise another dime, and we could be on a 15,000 kilogram per annum run rate of cannabis, and 15,000 kilos at a $8 per gram situation. You're looking at about 120 million in revenue and about 35 million in EBITDA, based on metrics that have been forecasted there by Echelon Wealth Partners in their various different analyst coverage reports.
Wow. So Dan, this is kind of my own personal question again. As opposed to gold, where you mine it in very specific regions, it's very geographically dependent. Cannabis is grown in pots. I'm not too familiar with exactly how it's grown, but is there any benefit to being in certain parts of the world? And I guess Canada, for instance, climate-wise, or any other reasons to be somewhere geographically?
Yeah, definitely from if you're looking at growing stuff that's more greenhouse based, there's a lot of talk about having a lower cost per gram. But if you look at a lot of the indoor that's done, and we're primarily indoor right now, is that you can control it much easier. So if you have any kind of mold issues or spider mite issues, any infestations, because you're not using any pesticides on the plants, it can be very tricky to to manage larger greenhouse space. So we've taken the approach that indoor is better controlled for better quality. As we continue to build out additional facilities, we'll also look at building out a greenhouse space, and that would be primarily dedicated to extraction for cannabis oils. But in terms of geographically in Canada, the thing that everybody has to kind of look at from being a licensed producer is really what's their electricity cost, because electricity is such a large component with the lights on an indoor situation. And one of our facilities actually out in Alberta has one of the lowest costs per kilowatt hour in the country, which is great. Low cost of electricity, low cost of disposal, etc. And that really brings the cost per gram down and makes it very competitive in terms of our peers.
So Dan, here we are at the end of 2017, California, full-blown recreational legalization here in January 2018, Canada, nationwide, 2018, we're looking at July, I believe. So much opportunity. Just talk to us a little bit more by way of closing out. Why now is important to be looking at the cannabis space?
Yeah, definitely. This is I think an opportunity that only comes once in a lifetime. Very fortunate to be part of this, where you have a situation where it's a market that's been created. It's been around for decades. It's been very profitable. We talk about the billions of dollars that's created for the economy on the black market, and now coming to the light side and being everything legal. I think investors have to really look at this as being pioneers of something that already exists, and having that kind of opportunity of something that already exists doesn't come too often. It's not that we're testing something. It's not cloud computing. It's not things that we don't understand. It's something that's very easily understandable. It's a consumer packaged goods type situation. There's going to be a lot of competition in the marketplace, but the early risers like Invictus that come to the table are going to be the ones that are going to get the shelf space, like the Grey Gooses of the world. So in closing, I think that investors should be looking at this space as it's a speculative buy right now, and in terms of where the industry is, it's not fully buttoned up and paying dividends, etc., but it will be. But once it's paying dividends, the kind of 30, 40, 50 or 10x returns are not going to be there. It'll be more of like a 4 to 5% paying dividend. And I think coming in early over the next 6 to 12 months definitely before it goes recreational, is a real opportunity for investors to come in and make a significant return.
Yeah, that's really exciting. The early days of the boom cycle, and I totally agree with you. I think we're there. Dan Kriznic. Dan, thanks for coming on with me at Crush the Street here. If people want to learn more about the company, please let them know where they can go, and also the tickers as well.
Definitely, yeah. Thanks for having me. So if anybody wants further information, they can visit our website at www.invictus-md.com. And if you'd like to check us out on the TSX Venture, the symbol is IMH, or on the over-the-counter market in the US, IVITF.
All right, Dan, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks for having me.